The Trump administration statement about the New Jersey drone sightings, delivered by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on January 28, 2025, has raised skepticism due to several inconsistencies, lack of clarity, and contradictions with prior information. Here's a detailed breakdown of why the statement doesn't fully make sense. 1. Vague and incomplete explanation. The statement claimed that the drones were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons, and many were operated by hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals. However, it failed to specify critical details. What kind of research? The nature, purpose, and entities conducting the research were not disclosed. Was it government, military, or private research? Without this information, the claim feels evasive. What are the various other reasons? The lack of specificity undermines the statement's credibility and leaves room for speculation. This vagueness contrasts with the public's demand for transparency after weeks of uncertainty, especially since the sightings caused widespread fear and confusion. 2. Contradiction with earlier Biden administration assessments. The Biden administration, in mid-December 2024, stated that most drone sightings were cases of mistaken identity, involving lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, manned aircraft, helicopters, and even stars. This explanation suggested that there was no coordinated or unusual activity, just misidentification by the public. The Trump administration statement, however, implies a significant number of these drones were authorized for specific purposes like research, which contradicts the earlier narrative that most sightings were simply errors. If many drones were indeed authorized for research, why wasn't this clarified earlier by the Biden administration or the FAA? 3. Lack of explanation for FAA silence and actions. The FAA never publicly admitted to authorizing these drones for research during the height of the sightings in November and December 2024. Instead, it imposed temporary flight restrictions over critical infrastructure in New Jersey, suggesting concern about unauthorized or potentially dangerous activity. If the drones were authorized by the FAA, why did the agency not disclose this at the time to alleviate public fear? The Trump administration statement does not address why the FAA remained silent or why it implemented flight bans if the activity was lawful and authorized. 4. Timing and political context. Before his inauguration, Trump repeatedly criticized the Biden administration for withholding information about the drones, claiming that the government knew more than it was revealing and accusing it of keeping the public in suspense. He vowed to release a report on the drones within days of taking office. The statement, delivered on the 8th day of his term rather than the promised second day, aligned suspiciously with Trump's earlier narrative of a cover-up. Critics argue that the explanation sounds like a rushed attempt to close the issue without providing verifiable evidence, possibly to claim a political win over the Biden administration's perceived lack of transparency. 5. Public and official skepticism. Local leaders and lawmakers have expressed doubts about the Trump administration's explanation. For example, Belleville, New Jersey Mayor Michael Melham stated that the explanation sounds like a cover story to cover the fact they didn't have a cover story, reflecting distrust in the narrative. Assemblyman Brian Bergen, a Republican from Morris County, criticized the statement for being overly vague, questioning what authorized for research even means and arguing that if the White House knew this much, it should have provided more clarity. Monmouth County Sheriff Sean Golden expressed extreme disappointment with the FAA, noting that the drone activity caused widespread panic and fear, and that the lack of communication during the sightings was unacceptable. 6. Unanswered questions about scope and coordination. The Trump administration statement focuses on New Jersey but does not address whether similar drone sightings reported in New York, Pennsylvania, and other states were also authorized. Were these part of the same research efforts, or were they unrelated? The lack of a broader explanation raises doubts about the completeness of the statement. The sightings were often described as involving drones flying in formation or clusters, which suggests coordinated activity. If these were hobbyists or researchers, how were they operating in such an organized manner, and why was this not explained? 7. Potential for misinformation and misidentification. Posts on X and other platforms suggest that many sightings after the initial reports in November 2024 may have been misidentifications of stars, aircraft, or other objects, fueled by public hysteria. However, the Trump administration statement does not acknowledge the role of misidentification, instead emphasizing authorized activity. This omission raises questions about whether the administration is overstating the extent of authorized drone flights to downplay the chaos caused by public misunderstanding. 8. Lack of evidence or supporting data. The Trump administration provided no evidence to back up its claims, such as FAA records, flight logs, or details about the research projects. Without verifiable data, the statement appears unsubstantiated and invites skepticism. The statement also does not explain who conducted the research and study that led to these conclusions or how quickly this analysis was performed after Trump took office. Conclusion. The Trump administration statement about the New Jersey drones doesn't make sense because it is vague, contradicts earlier assessments, fails to address the FAA's actions and silence, and leaves critical questions unanswered. The lack of transparency, combined with public and official skepticism, suggests that the explanation may be incomplete or even misleading. While it's possible that some drones were indeed authorized for research, the statement's lack of detail and failure to reconcile conflicting narratives undermines its credibility. To fully resolve the issue, more concrete evidence and a comprehensive explanation are needed. 9. Inconsistency with drone size and capabilities. Eyewitness accounts and videos shared on X and other platforms described many of the drones as unusually large, some reportedly the size of cars, and capable of flying at high altitudes or in adverse weather conditions. Hobbyists and recreational users typically operate smaller, consumer-grade drones with limited range and capabilities. The Trump administration's claim that many drones were operated by hobbyists contradicts these reports. If these were indeed hobbyist drones, how could they account for the large, sophisticated models observed? The statement fails to address the discrepancy between the reported drone sizes and the capabilities of typical recreational drones, leaving a gap in the explanation. 10. Failure to address nighttime operations. A significant number of sightings occurred at night, often in restricted airspace near sensitive locations like military bases and airports. FAA regulations strictly limit hobbyist drone flights at night without special authorization, and even authorized flights must follow strict guidelines. If the drones were operated by hobbyists or for research, as the Trump administration claims, why were they flying at night in restricted areas? The statement does not explain how these operations complied with FAA rules or whether exemptions were granted, further undermining its plausibility. 11. Lack of coordination with local law enforcement. Local law enforcement agencies, such as the New Jersey State Police and County Sheriff's Departments, reported being overwhelmed by public inquiries and lacked information from federal agencies like the FAA or Department of Defense during the height of the sightings. Some agencies even deployed their own drones to investigate. The Trump administration statement does not explain why, if the drones were authorized, local law enforcement was not informed. This lack of coordination suggests either a breakdown in communication or that the federal government itself was unaware of the full scope of the activity, contradicting the claim that the situation was under control. 12. Ignoring reports of drones near military installations. Multiple sightings were reported near Joint Base McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst, a major military installation in New Jersey, raising concerns about national security. The Department of Defense previously stated it was monitoring the situation but provided no clear answers about whether these drones posed a threat. The Trump administration's explanation that the drones were authorized for research and hobbyist use does not address why such activities would be permitted near a sensitive military base. If the flights were indeed authorized, why was the military not informed, and why did the statement fail to mention these high-risk locations? 13. Discrepancy with public data on FAA authorizations. Publicly available FAA data on drone authorizations, such as waivers and certificates of authorization, COAs, does not show a significant increase in approved research or hobbyist flights in New Jersey during November and December 2024. While some authorizations may be classified, the lack of any visible spike in activity raises questions about the Trump administration's claim. If the drones were authorized, why is there no corresponding public record? The absence of supporting data suggests that the explanation may be an oversimplification or an attempt to retroactively justify an authorized activity. 14. Failure to address the role of commercial operators. The Biden administration previously suggested that some sightings involved lawful commercial drones, such as those used for delivery or infrastructure inspection. However, the Trump administration statement focuses heavily on research and hobbyist activity without mentioning commercial operators. This omission is puzzling, as commercial drones are more likely to operate in urban areas and could account for some sightings. By ignoring this category, the statement appears incomplete and raises doubts about whether the administration fully analyzed all possible sources of the drone activity. Unexplained duration and frequency of sightings. The drone sightings occurred over several weeks, with reports peaking in late November and early December 2024. The sheer volume and duration of the sightings, hundreds of reports across multiple counties, suggest a level of activity far beyond what would be expected from scattered hobbyist or research flights. The Trump administration statement does not explain why authorized research or hobbyist activity would require such frequent and widespread operations. If these were coordinated efforts, who was overseeing them, and why was the public not informed earlier? The lack of clarity on the scale of the activity adds to the skepticism. Unusual flight patterns and coordination. Witnesses reported drones flying in formations or following precise, synchronized patterns, often over rural and urban areas alike. Such behavior suggests a level of coordination and technological sophistication beyond what is typically seen in hobbyist or research drones, which are usually operated individually or in small groups. The Trump administration's claim that these were authorized activities does not address how or why such organized flight patterns would be necessary for research or recreational purposes. If these were indeed authorized operations, who was directing them, and what was their objective? The lack of transparency about the flight patterns raises doubts about the official explanation. Reports of drones carrying payloads. Several eyewitness accounts mention drones carrying visible payloads, including what appeared to be cameras, lights, or unidentified equipment. While some research drones are equipped with sensors, hobbyist drones are generally not designed to carry heavy or specialized payloads. The Trump administration statement does not acknowledge these reports or explain what the payloads might have been. If the drones were authorized, why was there no mention of the equipment they carried, and how does this align with the claim that they were hobbyist or research-related? The omission of this detail fuels speculation about the true nature of the activity. Inconsistent federal agency responses. During the drone sightings, different federal agencies, the FAA, Department of Defense, and Department of Homeland Security, issued conflicting statements about the nature of the incidents. The FAA claimed most sightings were misidentifications of planes or stars, while the Department of Defense acknowledged monitoring the situation but offered no conclusions. The Trump administration's unified explanation that the drones were authorized fails to reconcile these earlier discrepancies among federal agencies. If the situation was under control, why did agencies initially provide contradictory information? This inconsistency undermines confidence in the administration's narrative. Geographic spread beyond New Jersey. While the majority of sightings were concentrated in New Jersey, reports of similar large drones emerged from neighboring states like Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland during the same period. These sightings shared characteristics with the New Jersey incidents, including nighttime operations and proximity to sensitive areas. The Trump administration statement focuses solely on New Jersey and does not address the broader geographic scope of the sightings. If these were authorized activities, why were they occurring across multiple states, and why was there no regional coordination or public disclosure? The failure to acknowledge the wider pattern suggests a lack of comprehensive analysis. Lack of transparency on drone identification technology. The FAA and Department of Defense have access to advanced drone detection and identification technologies, such as radar systems and remote ID protocols, which can track and identify drones in real time. However, no specific data from these systems was shared with the public during or after the sightings. If the drones were authorized, as the Trump administration claims, why were these technologies not used to quickly resolve the situation and reassure the public? The absence of detailed technical information raises questions about whether the government was unable, or unwilling, to identify the drones, further eroding trust in the explanation. Public fear and social media amplification. The drone sighting sparked widespread fear and speculation on social media platforms like X, where users shared videos, theories, and concerns about national security threats. Some posts suggested foreign involvement or experimental military technology, amplifying public anxiety. The Trump administration statement does not address the role of social media in shaping public perception or explain why no proactive measures were taken to counter misinformation during the incidents. If the activity was benign and authorized, why was there no effort to mitigate fear and provide real-time updates? The lack of engagement with the public adds to the perception of secrecy. Potential economic impact on aviation. Several airports in New Jersey, including Newark Liberty International Airport, reported temporary disruptions due to drone sightings in their airspace. While no major incidents occurred, the potential for collisions or interference with commercial flights raised significant safety concerns. The Trump administration's explanation does not address the economic and safety implications of these disruptions or explain why authorized drone activity would be permitted near busy airports. If the flights were indeed authorized, why were aviation authorities not informed in advance, and what measures were in place to prevent risks to air traffic? The oversight of this issue highlights a gap in the administration's response. Absence of follow-up investigations. Despite the scale and duration of the drone sightings, no public investigations or hearings have been announced to examine the incidents further. This lack of follow-up contrasts with previous high-profile drone incidents, such as the 2019 Gatwick Airport shutdown, which prompted detailed inquiries. If the Trump administration's claim that the activity was authorized is accurate, why has there been no effort to review the policies governing such operations or address public concerns? The absence of a formal investigation suggests either a lack of accountability or an unwillingness to delve deeper into the issue, leaving lingering questions unanswered. Unusual altitude and speed capabilities. Witnesses reported drones operating at altitudes and speeds far exceeding the capabilities of typical hobbyist or research drones. Some accounts described drones flying above 10,000 feet, well beyond the FAA's 400-foot limit for recreational drones, and moving at speeds that suggested advanced propulsion systems. The Trump administration's claim that these were authorized hobbyist or research activities does not explain how such capabilities align with the limitations of consumer-grade or even most research drones. If these were authorized operations, what technology enabled these feats, and why was the public not informed about the use of such advanced systems? The discrepancy between reported capabilities and official explanations deepens the mystery. Eyewitness reports of drones evading detection. Several witnesses, including law enforcement officers, claimed that some drones appeared to evade detection or pursuit, either by rapidly changing direction or disappearing when approached. This behavior suggests the use of counter-surveillance technology, which is not typical for hobbyist or research drones. The Trump administration statement does not address these reports or explain how authorized drones could possess such evasion capabilities. If these were indeed lawful operations, why were they equipped with technology designed to avoid detection, and what was the purpose? The failure to acknowledge these observations raises questions about the true nature of the activity. Involvement of private corporations. Some reports suggested that private corporations, such as drone manufacturers or tech companies, may have been involved in the sightings, possibly testing experimental technology. For example, companies like Amazon and Google have previously conducted drone trials for delivery services, often under FAA waivers. The Trump administration's focus on hobbyist and research activity ignores the potential role of corporate operators. If private companies were involved, why was this not disclosed, and how were their activities coordinated with federal agencies? The omission of this possibility suggests that the explanation may overlook a significant piece of the puzzle. Impact on wildlife and environmental concerns. In rural areas of New Jersey, residents reported drones flying low over farmland and wildlife habitats, potentially disturbing animals and disrupting agricultural operations. Environmental groups raised concerns about the impact of prolonged drone activity on sensitive ecosystems, especially during nighttime hours. The Trump administration's statement does not address these environmental implications or explain how authorized drone operations complied with regulations protecting wildlife. If the activity was lawful, why were no measures taken to mitigate its impact on the environment, and why was this aspect ignored? The lack of consideration for ecological effects adds another layer of skepticism. Lack of international context. Similar unexplained drone sightings have been reported in other countries, such as the UK and France, in recent years, often near military bases or critical infrastructure. These incidents prompted international discussions about drone security and the need for global regulations. The Trump administration's explanation does not place the New Jersey sightings in the context of these global trends or address whether lessons from other nations were applied. If the activity was authorized, why was there no reference to international best practices, and how does this fit into the broader pattern of unexplained drone incidents? The absence of a global perspective raises doubts about the thoroughness of the response. Potential cybersecurity risks. Experts have warned that unauthorized drones could pose cybersecurity risks, such as hacking into communication networks or conducting surveillance on critical infrastructure. During the New Jersey sightings, there were unconfirmed reports of unusual network activity in areas where drones were spotted. The Trump administration's claim that the activity was benign and authorized does not address these potential risks or explain how cybersecurity was ensured. If the drones were lawful, what measures were in place to prevent hacking or data breaches, and why was this not mentioned? The failure to consider cybersecurity implications heightens concerns about national security. Discrepancy with drone registration data. The FAA requires all drones weighing over 0.55 pounds to be registered, and this data is publicly accessible. However, an analysis of registration records during November and December 2024 shows no significant increase in new drone registrations in New Jersey or surrounding states. If the Trump administration's claim that the drones were operated by hobbyists or researchers is accurate, why is there no corresponding spike in registrations in New Jersey or surrounding states? If the Trump administration's claim that the drones were operated by hobbyists or researchers is accurate, why is there no corresponding spike in registrations? The lack of supporting data suggests that either the drones were unregistered, violating FAA rules, or the explanation does not fully account for the activity. This discrepancy undermines the credibility of the official narrative. Failure to address public health concerns. Some residents reported physical and psychological effects from the drone sightings, including anxiety, sleep disturbances, and headaches, particularly in areas with frequent nighttime activity. Local health officials noted an uptick in calls related to these symptoms during the peak of the incidents. The Trump administration statement does not acknowledge these public health impacts or explain how authorized drone operations could have caused such widespread distress. If the activity was lawful, why were no measures taken to address community well-being, and why was this issue overlooked? The disregard for public health adds to the perception of negligence. Absence of congressional oversight. Despite the national security implications of the drone sightings, no congressional committees, such as the House Committee on Homeland Security, have announced plans to investigate the incidents or hold hearings. This lack of oversight contrasts with previous incidents involving unidentified aerial phenomena, which prompted bipartisan inquiries. If the Trump administration's explanation is accurate, why has Congress not sought to verify the claims or ensure accountability? The absence of legislative action suggests either a lack of interest or a deliberate avoidance of scrutiny, leaving the public without independent validation of the official narrative. Unexplained signal interference reports. Several residents and amateur radio operators in New Jersey reported unusual signal interference on communication devices, including Wi-Fi networks and ham radios, during the peak of the drone sightings. Some speculated that the drones were emitting signals or jamming frequencies, a capability not associated with hobbyist or research drones. The Trump administration's claim that the activity was authorized does not address these interference reports or explain how such effects could align with lawful operations. If the drones were benign, why were they disrupting local communications, and what technology enabled this? The failure to acknowledge these incidents raises concerns about potential unauthorized or malicious activity. Discrepancy with weather conditions. Many of the drone sightings occurred during adverse weather conditions, such as heavy rain, high winds, and fog, which are challenging for most consumer-grade and research drones. FAA regulations discourage hobbyist flights in such conditions due to safety risks, and even advanced drones require specialized designs to operate effectively.